Ladies and gentlemen, your attention, please. Yes, I mean you. Your attention, please.
This is the PowerShell Podcast. PowerShell Podcast. It's all about PowerShell and the PowerShell community.
We have with us today a man who is so much a part of the culture that he scarcely needs an introduction.
And now, here's your hosts, Jordan Hammond and Andrew Plaw.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the PowerShell Podcast. I'm co-host Jordan Hammond with the other co-host as well, in addition, Andrew Plaw.
Hello.
Today we're joined by Cory Knox, who is going to hopefully take my side on against Andrew's hate.
Hello.
You know, while we're on the subject of settings in VS Code, Cory Knox, is there a way to synchronize your settings between multiple instances of VS Code? For example, let's say you have one primary instance on your main machine of VS Code. You got your settings. You have another machine. How do you get the settings there? Is there any kind of a plugin that does that or anything like that within VS Code?
I keep seeing it tell me that I should sign in and use settings sync, but maybe I'm taking Jordan's side on this, but I actually don't sign in to do the sync, and I set it up manually on each computer and grumble about it the whole time because there are a number of settings that I like to have set. I know there used to be a plugin to do it that would store it in GitHub Gist, but I believe it's actually built right into VS Code itself now.
Yeah.
And you can sign in with your either a GitHub or a Microsoft account, if I recall.
Yeah, that can be a cool solution. I've used it before for syncing my settings. It can be nice. But once you kind of know what you like and what you set, like when you get to Cory's level, you can just set the stuff manually if you'd like. But, you know, it is a little useful.
You know, I'm going to make changes to my terminal, and it's all going to be just off. I'm going to have you remote in, and you're going to wish it was back at the default.
I mean, at least add the little graphics. So whenever you type, you know, it looks like things are like exploding or whatever.
But there is one for VS Code too, isn't there? I know in Hyper, there's an extension you can use for Hyper, which is a JavaScript based terminal. But PS Readline, at least on Mac, like it eats the keystrokes, so you don't actually get exploding letters. But when PS Readline is not involved, then you can have your letters explode and.
So I know in Windows Terminal, Justin Grody has it to where if he runs something and it's successful, it will pull back a GIF of just a celebration.
Which, it does the background image, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. That's the thing about VS Code. You know, you can use it with the default settings like Jordan does, and you can get stuff done. But also, it is a real freaking tool. It is used in many instances, very customizable. If you want to push it to its limits, you can do a lot of very cool, fun things. And productive, but really fun.
So sometimes they're productive, but often they're fun.
See, I like the idea of the exploding character because it matches up well with anything I write. There's a lot of flash, no substance. So it's really that'll be my wheelhouse. They should actually just name that the Jordan. All right. I suppose if we're going to be professional, should we actually introduce Cory? So
I said hello.
So Cory, you came all the way from the internet. You're currently working at Chocolatey as a software developer?
As a software engineer. Yep.
And you are heavily involved in the PowerShell Discord. I think you were an admin in there.
I am a moderator in there, I think.
Well, that's not good. I feel like
depending on what you say today, they might revoke it at the end.
That was the way I described it the other day to the moderators, because someone in moderator chat was saying, "Oh, like it's size that the admin spending hours figuring out things that only show up in a moderator chat." And I said, "Well, I'm not an admin." They responded with admins, moderators, helpers is another role, whatever. And I said, well, random people we gave imaginary power to. It's basically how I would describe the
How
moderator.
can I get this imaginary power? Because it will go to my head, but it's important that I get it.
I mean, if you want it in the same way that I got it, I have no idea. Just one day I was like, oh, hey, I'm a moderator.
I think you're pretty active, though.
Yeah, you need to be active, which is I'm
Yeah.
definitely lacking in that area.
I'm pretty
And
sure
helpful.
you need to be active and helpful, and now we kind of have more of a tiered structure. We've got, if I recall, it's there's helpers that have access into the moderator channel, and are seen as people in the community that are very helpful, but they don't necessarily have the powers on the Discord to delete other people's messages and or kick people off the Discord or anything like that. And then there's moderators, and then above that is the admins that can actually control stuff on the Discord. So I imagine now to move up to moderator, you'd have to first get helper, and then prove that you're. So you have to prove that you're helpful enough to become a helper, and then prove that you're even more helpful than that to become a moderator.
Nice.
Or maybe admins just assign them at random. I don't know.
Well, instead of bettering myself, I'll just what if I just bring up a complaint instead? Is that the same thing?
It's pretty similar. The other way I imagine you could get moderator or helper is to commandeer someone else's account.
There we go.
That already has that. Then you just skip through all that other stuff, right? But
so I would like to say, recently I was in there and I posted absolute failure on my side, and then it copied it over in Slack, like just sent me another message like, just so you remember that time that you posted about your failures, here's a duplicate. And that didn't feel good. I hurt my feelings.
Well, it didn't copy it to you in Slack. It just sent it also to the Slack.
And then my Slack alert was like, you're a failure. I'm like, oh, that seems harsh.
So we're talking about the PowerShell Discord, and you're also mentioning Slack. So I guess where else can people access this chat? Because the way I understand it, there's a couple of channels, or at least one channel, the Bridge channel, that bridges the Slack, the Discord, and what else is included in that?
If I recall correctly, Bridge is a bridge between Slack and Discord and IRC. And it may or may not also bridge over to Matrix. But Bridge also might be one that doesn't get Matrix. There's Matrix has a few it's bridged into a few of them, and I can't remember if Bridge was one that it's bridged into or it's explicitly not bridged into.
Okay.
But yeah, so there's the Bridge channel. As said, that bridges all of them, and then there's other module specific or more technology specific ones that don't include IRC, but still typically would do Discord and Slack and possibly Matrix.
Because I posted mine in the Utah channel, so I think the individual states will also copy it over to the state channel in Slack.
Yeah. So the various user groups ones, if you're in, or if you post in those, like all the user group ones are also bridged across. And I believe there's a SQL Server one and a few others that also bridge to other Slacks. So like I believe there's a SQL Server oriented Slack or Discord that has like a PowerShell channel that bridges into the PowerShell SQL Server. And some of them even have Gitter bridged in. So,
and awesome.
One of the things I think cool about it is there's different rooms based on popular modules. So like if you're getting into DBA tools and you're loving it and
Yeah.
you have some things to talk about, perfect place to go.
Yep. There's DBA tools. One that I'm in in somewhat more regularly is the Import Excel channel, all about the Import Excel module.
You find that's pretty active?
Well, I mean, there was people talking in it yesterday, so that's,
Seems like a pretty popular module.
it's pretty popular. The one thing I find with a fair number of the channels is that they kind of ebb and flow. There'll be like if someone has something to ask about that specific module, they'll go there, they'll ask it. There'll be a whole bunch of activity of people helping them, and then it would go dormant for a week, 2 weeks, a month, and then someone else will pop up in there with another question. Which on the Discord side, the nice thing about Discord is that it keeps that history, and it's not limited to the last 10,000 messages or whatever Slack is limited to. So as a user, you can go into that channel and you can see when the last message was, but also like what people were discussing. So you could potentially find your issue already answered in there.
Very cool. And that's the PowerShell Discord with the infinite search capability. And I believe the URL to access that is aka.ms/ps Slack for the Slack, or aka.ms/ps Discord for the Discord. And those will get you the right link and invitation to get access if you haven't already.
The one thing I want to, I believe it's all lowercase. So I think they're also case sensitive.
Awesome. Yeah, that's what I typed in. I'll leave it in the show notes as well. But it's definitely, I mean, there's conversations always going on there. It's a great place to ask questions, whether you're a beginner or asking a more advanced question about PowerShell. You can find, at least from what I've seen, a lot of experts who really understand the internals and can provide some great insight.
There are a lot of people in there that help out fairly regularly that, my opinion, probably have forgotten more about PowerShell than I will ever know.
Yeah.
So.
I feel like that's a different bar for you than it is for me.
which then maybe just shows how much higher they are than where I figure I am.
Yeah.
There's just sometimes you're talking to people and they go over your head so quick and they don't even realize that they've gone into the deep end because it's still shallow for them.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. There's a lot to know out there.
Which is good. I can always learn.
In the PowerShell Discord, you can even ask these people directly and they can give you some great insight. I remember I've asked a few questions in there and been shocked at how helpful it can be when you're banging your head against something it's not quite making sense to just ask for a sanity check. A lot of times it'll take another person, 6 seconds in their brain to be like, oh yeah, I did that exact same thing and found out that my solution was this. You actually should try this. It took them no time. They feel good for helping you and you're no longer beating your head into your keyboard.
Yeah. And often what's often discounted about it is that like they can see that in that 6 seconds or whatever, probably because they bashed their head against the wall over that for a long time. So and so sometimes it's also good to just know that you're not the first person to encounter it. You probably won't be the last person. But knowing that there is like a community that it's so helpful too.
Definitely. And I think that it's more than just technical questions. I think that there is a community feel to it. There are familiar faces, there's relationships, and it's been active for so long. seems like, I mean, how long have you been using it? I remember BridgeConf was a couple years ago, and you were quite active for quite a while before that.
Yeah, BridgeConf was would have been end of April 2020. When did we? So, because I was technically in the PowerShell Discord before there was officially a PowerShell Discord. We didn't.
Okay, VIP status. Okay, we didn't know.
I was in it before it was
Excuse
cool.
me, red carpet.
Back in the day, there was the Slack channel,
Right.
and Jekyll, Joel Bennett had created a Discord, and I want to say it was the early days of Discord, but also my time scales for things are really wonky, as I found out last year when I left, or when I started at Chocolatey, and we went over the history of Chocolatey, and we're asked, like, when did you start using Chocolatey? And I realized that I thought I started using Chocolatey several years before Chocolatey was ever a thing. So my time scales are way off, because I want to say it was well over 10 years ago that I joined the PowerShell Discord, but it's probably more like 6 or 7.
Wow.
Like probably 2015, 2016 timeframe. But they had created Jekyll had created the Discord and was checking out possibly to switch completely from the Slack and just drop Slack entirely. So I had joined in it. We only had there was only like 10 channels. No one was really saying anything in it. And then and Slack and Discord at the time also wasn't where it is now. And so I think we had decided, well, we'll stick with Slack for now, and stayed with Slack. And then at some point, the bot that was used for bridging IRC also, I think it's called Mattermost or Matter something.
That sounds about right.
But it started including the ability to bridge over to Discord, and so we looped in the Discord, and then a lot of us moved over to Discord because Discord offered a dark mode.
That's a big selling point I've noticed.
Slack technically now offers a dark mode too. So, but
It's too late.
at the time, it was Slack didn't have any. It had a concept of theming, but the main chat window was all still a light mode type thing. So, a lot of us were like, "Oh, come over to Discord. We have the dark mode, like, and cookies. Sometimes we would offer cookies."
So your big sell point is you would track their traffic and where they'd been?
Well, potentially. No, we also we offer treats, though we usually a lie though. So we tell them that, oh, if you come over, we'll send you a cake, and then we get them over and be like, oh, sorry, we ran out of cake. So but you're here, so you might as well stay.
So the PowerShell Discord is basically the precursor to GLaDOS.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, I don't know when.
Real?
Maybe, and maybe it's a lie.
Interesting.
You'll have to put it in the oven and find out.
This is a deep conversation. But wow, so that's quite a long time to be on the Discord. And it's kind of a new thing. Obviously you mentioned Discord was created. How have those relationships you've developed? Have you made any good friendships from there? Anybody you want to shout out? I mean, we mentioned BridgeConf earlier. Could you elaborate on that? What was that? It sounds like that kind of is the culmination of some relationships and friendships.
Yeah. So BridgeConf was a Dilligari and Mr. Thomas Rayner, who messaged me one night and said, "Hey, how would you like exposure?" And I said, "Oh boy, would I! Boy, what a fool!"
My favorite
I was.
currency.
It's way better than money.
As far as probably some of my best friends have come from Discord, and being honest, I haven't met most of them in real life. Actually, any of them in real life. So I was gonna meet all of you at Summit, but passport office didn't get me my passport until a month afterwards.
Dang.
So
Wow. I didn't realize you haven't met anybody in person yet.
I've been, and you know, I live in the same Canadian province as Adele, and and there have been a few times where I've said, "Hey, I'm going to be in town," and then, as luck would have it, he wasn't in town every single time. So,
I see you around so often. I feel like I've seen you. I've just seen you on video chat so often.
yeah,
It feels like.
basically.
When we're doing research, we got it pulled in Summit videos that said you presented. So if you weren't there, I'm confused about what's happening here.
I presented at Summit 2022.
Oh, okay.
And was going to present in person, but my passport, which is right here, didn't show up until after Summit. And passport wanted, like, they said, "Oh, you can get your passport if you submit a new application and pay like $400 to have it expedited, and then hopefully you can pick it up on your way through town down to the US border on Sunday." And I was just like,
Oh, that's a big gamble.
like, I'm not taking that gamble.
I've never had a passport because I'm pretty sure the country just wants to get rid of me. So like, oh yeah, here you go. Then once I'm there, it's like, and close it.
They'll revoke your passport as soon as you leave the country. But yeah, so
What
that's
were your
why
talks on?
I did a talk on creating graphical interfaces with PowerShell, natively with PowerShell, not using, or I say creating graphical interfaces. Technically, it was creating scripts that your users will actually use, and using the graphical interface features of Windows PowerShell to allow you to basically quickly create ways that, like, to interact with your user that they don't get intimidated by. Because I know a lot of the users that I worked with, especially when they were, like, if they were on the service desk, were not huge fans of a terminal. So I used show command to prompt them with, hey, type some stuff in here. And then the other one was on using Git work tree, which is a amazingly powerful feature of Git that allows you to have multiple work trees, multiple directories that your Git repository is in, and each directory is a different branch checked out to it, without having to fully clone down another copy of your repository. Because that's kind of what I did before I learned about Git work tree. I would just open up a new directory. I'd say git clone, and then I'd download 200 megs of a repository when I only needed, like, I don't know, 2 megs.
Interesting. So you seem to know a thing or two about Git. Is that your forte a little bit?
A little bit. I have certainly in the last year or two, I've learned a lot more about Git than I ever wanted to, and I have strong opinions about how wonderful and terrible it is, but also everything else that I used before it was even more terrible. So it's got that going for it.
We talked about heads and keyboards earlier today. It sounds like you may have learned a thing or two about Git the old-fashioned way.
Yeah. There's and Git's really good about or can often be good about protecting you from yourself. So if there are a lot of Git commands that can do a lot of damage, but also you can just reverse pretty much most Git commands. It's when you do stuff like I did, where I had a whole bunch of stashes one time, and a stash is just kind of a temporary commit off to the side of your files, so you can pull them back whenever you want them. And I was running into an issue with a Git client I was using. I was like, oh, I know how to fix this. I'll delete this directory and I'll reclone the directory because everything's up in GitHub. And then I did that and realized, oh, well, there go all my stashes, because these stashes are not there. And so, unfortunately, Git wasn't able to help me with that, because I left Git and went to the file system and just deleted the whole directory. But as long as you don't delete the .git directory, you can pretty much get most things back that you've done with Git.
Awesome. I know that some of our audience aren't as familiar with Git and are just kind of taking the first steps into interacting with like GitHub projects and, you know, that kind of thing. How do you recommend people get started using Git if they're using PowerShell stuff? At least public projects. Maybe they haven't started using it for their own, but how would you kind of attack that?
So first I'd install Git. So you do Choco Git or Choco install Git, because there's a Chocolatey package for it. And we all have Chocolatey installed, of course. Shameless plug for Chocolatey.
You can go ask for that raise.
So once Git is installed, and then you would use, if you're pulling down from like a GitHub repository, actually, let me pull one up so I'm not just completely winging it here. On the GitHub repository page, you can actually, if you go to, there's a code button at the top, and then you can choose HTTPS, SSH, or GitHub CLI. And if you just grab HTTPS and hit the little copy button, then in your PowerShell terminal, you can do a git space clone space, and then paste in that URL that it gave you. And that will clone down the repository onto your computer into a new directory that's named the same as your Git repository that you cloned. And then you would CD into that repository and work on whatever you want to work on in it. And then when you're ready, you would use the git add to add the files that you changed, and then git commit to commit the files into your repository.
Cool. So when we do that initial Git clone and we get a copy of all the files, because it's a repository, I guess, does that mean we get copies of other branches too?
Yes. Any other branches that are on that remote repository, they'll I'm trying to remember if Git will bring them down, but it won't necessarily. Oh no, I think it does. It brings them down, and then you can, once they're down, you can check out, use the git checkout or git switch command to switch over to that. And then, assuming it's only one on one, like there's only one named that, which if you've only cloned one repository, then there will only be one. It will check it out and automatically set it so that it tracks differences between the remote, which is on GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket or what have you, and your local one. And that way, Git status can then also tell you if there are changes between them.
And I think that would be a good plug for our Posh Git that we mentioned earlier.
Yes.
Here.
Yes, Posh Git is immensely useful in the PowerShell terminal. You can just install -module space posh-git, and then once it's installed, you can import module posh-git. And if you haven't customized your prompt, and this is getting back to where if you're like Jordan and myself and haven't customized your prompt, you will then automatically get the posh-git prompt, which is basically a standard prompt plus get information on it if you're in a Git repository. And that Git information will tell you what branch you're on, if it's tracking a remote, so if it's, when I say tracking, it's linked up to a remote branch, and can, like, you can, if you tell it to get pushed, then it will push it to that branch. And then any of the files that have changed. And also, if you're in the middle of a Git rebase or a Git bisect, it will also tell you that information as well.
Cool. So it sounds like whenever you do a Git clone, the repository kind of contains information about where this all came from. So if in the future there's updates, you can, from Git, call the remote URL to get the updates, kind of thing. And there's also, it sounds like, some other connections to, like, maybe upstream branches and stuff like that contained within the Git.
Yeah. So if you were to, well, like, once you've cloned it, and so say you've cloned it onto your computer and I've made a change on GitHub. Now, if you want to get my change into yours, you would do in my opinion, you would do a Git fetch, which will fetch from the remote and ask it for any changes. And then PoshGit would then tell you that, hey, you're one behind the remote. And then at that point, you would do, you can do a Git, you can run Git rebase remote / and the name of your branch, which will then take any changes that are on that remote one, put them onto your local one, and then reapply any changes that you happen to have made locally that you hadn't pushed up. You can technically also Git pull, but Git pull can do some fun stuff if you're not careful with it. So I have been instructed that Git pull doesn't exist and should not be used. So I go out of my way to not use Git pull.
So when you're doing rebase, if it has conflicts with what you've been working on, do you choose which one you want to have take precedence, or is that one where it'll just give precedence to the one you're rebasing from, since that's the live version?
If there are conflicts that Git can't resolve for you, it will stop the rebase and it will flag the files that you have to go in and resolve the conflict yourself. And then when you go into those into those files, it will, the file will have, there's notation that it uses that's, I think it's a row of less than symbols, a row of equals symbols, and then the other lines from your local change, and then a row of greater than symbols. And so the idea is that you would then go into find those spots in the files and decide what that section of code should look like, whether you take in what was in the repository, whether you take in what's local, or whether you kind of mash them together and make your own. But it's usually pretty, as long as the changes aren't happening on the same file around the same lines, it's usually pretty good about not having conflicts.
Now, those are all command line utilities. Are there any worthwhile GUI interfaces to kind of work around with Git? I know that VS Code has some kind of built-in stuff, but what's your take on
that? So I tend to lean towards one I really like, if you're looking for open source, or maybe not necessarily open source, but free to use, is called Git Extensions. It's a Windows only, which is about my biggest complaint about it, is that it is Windows only, because I work on a Mac and have a Windows VM, so I can only have it in one place. But it's a pretty good one. It's not as flashy as some of the other ones, but it kind of has most features of Git built into it. If you're only working with open source, and or you're willing to pay, Git Kraken is another one. And I've been using Git Kraken for several months now, partly because they own a tool called Git Lens, which is an extension for VS Code. That is also another great option. And they Git Lens Plus Pro, I think is what they call it, offers the ability to use work trees from a graphical interface inside of Visual Studio Code. But Git Kraken is a pretty good one that I found, at least for my use cases, and it is cross-platform, so it works and looks the same on Mac as it does on Windows. The only drawback that I've run into with it on Mac was that I set my default shell to be PowerShell, and then Git Kraken didn't work for some things. But when I switched my default shell back to the built-in ZSH, then everything works in Git Kraken. So
Interesting. No mention of GitHub Desktop.
nope.
I guess that's not so much Git specific. It's more like GitHub, I guess.
Yeah, it is GitHub specific. It's GitHub specific. I used it several years ago, and I imagine, like, for what it does for working with GitHub, I imagine it's great. But one of the main reasons that I don't use it is that my work is split between GitHub and GitLab, and so I tend to look for, I want to look for a tool that works with both of them. And even at a former employer, we used an internal GitLab community edition, I think they call it. It's basically just an internal instance of GitLab that you run on your own internal servers. So even back then, I needed something that worked with both GitHub and GitLab, because a lot of the stuff that I did outside of work was GitHub, and at work was GitLab. So
cool. Whenever I got started, I used it, just honestly, the built-in stuff to GitHub for a lot of the simple things like getting updates or whatever for a repository that I had open. But I found that taking the step to using Git can often be a little daunting for people, because when you're trying to do Git stuff, you're usually actually trying to solve another problem, and Git is like part of that. So you have to like learn how to interface it, while really your goal is to do something else. So I think it can be useful for Git, and when learning it, to take a dedicated approach, like, hey, I'm going to learn it maybe outside of solving this immediate fire. And then kind of come back to it.
Definitely. And I'm big on the camp of, and it seems a lot of people that use Git, and maybe it's just because we were all taught this way, with Git, the best option is to start with the command line interface, like git.exe itself, and learn the commands and learn how to do things there before going to a graphical interface, because graphical interfaces are great, but inevitably you're going to run into something, and you're going to have to go to the command line to fix it, and to know what the graphical interface likely did is like the biggest step to getting to actually fixing what the command or what the graphical interface what it potentially broke. Because if you have no idea what commands it ran, then you could be up a creek.
Yeah. Reminds me, do you recommend that website, dangitgit.com? There's another name for it, but the website without swear names is dangitgit.com.
I want to. Do I have? To answer the question, yes. So much so that I have a PowerShell script that I haven't shared with anyone.
Ooh, exclusive.
Where could
Listen
you
up,
store
everyone.
something like that?
I have no idea. If anyone has any suggestions, but basically, I put in like I can type it's git.ps1 or something like that, and then it says, hey, pick a git scenario, and it's got a numbered list of 1 through 9 that says, oh no, I did something terribly wrong. Please tell me Git has a magic time machine. And that's option 1. So if I hit 1 and hit enter, it then actually automatically takes me to a web page that tells me, hey, here's how you would fix that. And the magic time machine is git reflog, and it lists everything you've done in Git across all the branches. And then you just find the one before whatever you broke and choose a git reset. And it kind of just tells you how to do it.
Very cool. That sounds useful.
I'm trying to
Sounds like a
remember
cool
if
kind
I
of thing,
hard
too.
coded it or okay. And the nice thing about it actually is I didn't hard code all of those options. So the script, as long as the website doesn't change itself, that script will always be up to date.
Interesting.
I should
That sounds-
probably put it somewhere that I can share it with others, and maybe it'd be really good if there was some sort of like gallery where I could put this sort of thing.
I can't think of
Gallery.
anything off the top of my head though.
Or a hub. Some
Yeah.
popular ones on the internet we could use, like GitHub.
Oh, there's Grubhub. Maybe I could
Hey.
order food with it.
Grubhub, Gravy Hub, if you really like gravy. Just kidding, it may not exist yet. That could be our PowerShell business.
Is that you attempting to trademark it live, like trying to know this is gold?
That's my idea. You heard it here. It came from my brain.
So I do like to look at existing repos in there, and you had one
Uh-oh.
that caught my eye. Toastmasters timer, because I spent time at Toastmasters and I love it. So
Did I actually put that one?
well,
Wait.
there's no code in there though. I went in there and there's
Okay.
no code yet. So I was excited, but now I'm disappointed. So what am I missing here?
Time doesn't exist.
Let me
My speeches do feel like they go on forever. So
let me
the
see
timers.
about that.
Great.
Toastmasters timer.
Are you a member of Toastmasters?
I am a member of Toastmasters.
And- The first couple of times I went, I wasn't sure if it was helpful, but I started getting comments on like webcasts that I do that everything was flowing better. So even if you don't see the instant results, the results are there, and it's just it's worth your time if you talk a lot, which I do.
Yeah.
So you're
which I
shilling
do.
for them now?
For Toastmasters, absolutely.
So cool. I mean, respectable. I might actually check it out if
So
it's a real recommendation.
If part of your wariness about giving a talk or presenting PowerShell is the talking in front of people, Toastmasters will fix it.
Yeah. And my local Toastmasters, at least, like it's been really good about one of the biggest things for me is the feedback, and not just feedback, because I've got the feedback forms from the talks I gave at Summit, but the difference in the feedback is at Toastmasters, you just gave the talk like maybe 5 minutes earlier, and now someone's giving you feedback on it, so it's fresh in your memory, and they give you feedback on all aspects of the talk. I've only been there really since 2021, I guess. So coming up on a year, and we've been mostly doing it over Zoom, and so like one of the things has been we've been evaluating each other on how it like interacting with Zoom, and I've been absolutely terrible at it today, but like looking at the camera,
I'm not
looking at
sure
the
we'll learn
camera.
every
You'll,
week.
you'll
You're
get no
seeing-
judgment here. Like, oh yeah, we're on camera.
Right, but like stuff about like virtual attendance and stuff.
Do you have
And-
someone that counts your filler words and lets you know how many you used? Because that was always shame inducing.
You call it shame inducing. I win the award virtually every week.
There you go, first place. I like it.
First place. The only weeks that I don't win it are when I am the counter, in which case I give myself honorable mention because I know that I did it, but not I didn't keep track of how many times I say ums and ahs.
So what you do is, as you count it, just say it under your breath, and that way you're saying it too, and then you get the sum total.
I mean, possibly, but but to kind of drag this back to what are you missing from this repository that I created and put absolutely nothing into, assuming that it matches up with the Toastmasters directory that's on my local computer, that is not actually a Git repository. This was a PowerShell script that I wrote. Because we were meeting virtually, I was using OBS to create a background, and I did one night I did the timer. So I have time.ps1 that starts a stopwatch .NET class, and then it writes the current time into timer.txt. And I told OBS to load that timer.txt and put it above my head. And then I told it, I had it blur out or remove everything. And then I had a background image that was either green, yellow, or red, because that's what one of the timer's tasks when they're timing things. When you get to certain points in person, you would hold up like a yellow or a red or white card. See, this is why I need Toastmasters, so I can talk more gooder. Like, but you would hold up a green card. So say we were doing table topics at 1 minute 30. No, at 1 minute you hold up a green card. At 1 minute 30 you hold up a yellow card, and then at 2 minutes you hold up a red card, and then start clapping at 2 minutes and 10. Is what I've been told, but we never did that because we're all too polite.
I think that's a common thing. Like, you're supposed to. I don't know. I have now a use case of 2, whereas usually mine we didn't clap at ours either. What I want to become the person that gives the topic, because I'd just be vicious. I'd give topics that like near and dear to my heart that no one else cares about. It's like, what do you think about the decrease in rebounds per minute since the 70s in the NBA?
I just imagine the two of you sitting there and just at 2 minutes and 10 seconds, you just start slow clapping. Bravo. They're still talking. It's just you. Great. Writing on your clipboard.
Basically.
Yeah, so the reason for that is you were given a 2-minute timer to give a speech, and if you're going over, you're technically outside the rules. So
Right.
it's
No, it makes sense.
yeah, it's
The 2-person dynamic is. I like that.
Yeah, but the so the PowerShell script, it starts a stopwatch, and every second it writes that timeout to a file. Actually, technically every half second it writes the timeout to a file. And so it displays the time. But then when you're done and you hit Control C on it, it actually, because the part that I forgot was that you call the function with a name. So I'd say like timer Jordan. And then when I'm done, I hit Control C and it dumps out to another file. It says Jordan : and then how long that talk was. So because at the end of a Toastmasters meeting, or at the end of table topics, you, as the timer, you go through and say, here's how long everyone spoke for. So I just did it it tracks how long they're speaking for, and it puts who it was into a file. So I load up the file and I say, oh, Jordan was 2 minutes and 5 seconds. Andrew was 1 minute and 45 seconds.
Look at you. PowerShell all the things.
Yeah, pretty much. And then I found a website that doesn't do the recording who it was and stuff, but it does the timer portion of it. and changes the color automatically. So I just started using that instead. But
Nice.
I should throw this code actually into the repository that I created.
Yeah, I'd
Good
definitely be
first
curious
step.
to see it. But honestly, I didn't expect it to be that much in Toastmasters, but I love Toastmasters. I think that I don't know. I probably should have brought it before. We're always talking about if you want to give a presentation at Summit, you should. If the part you're nervous about is the talking, Toastmasters is a fantastic solution for that.
Yeah, and the one of the things that they'll say, like at our local one, as well as the other places I've seen it, really that's where you want to go to, like to mess up your speech. That's where you want it is in a group that is overwhelmingly supportive and can help you on those various things.
They're
So,
the
like,
PowerShell community of public speaking.
Basically.
Awesome. So that sounds like a pretty cool use of PowerShell. Have an issue, have a list of steps that you want to do, bada boom, just write it out. Now, I'm going to ask, have you pushed the limits of PowerShell or done a project with PowerShell where you're like, why have I started doing this? What is the most absurd, outrageous thing you found yourself working on? The less work related, the better.
the less work related. Oh, that's a tough one. Because like for years I've gone down the, like, if the question is, can PowerShell do blank? And I believe I heard Jordan recently talking about, the answer is always and unequivocally yes. Now, should PowerShell do blank?
No one asked that.
Or how long will it take for PowerShell to do blank? I've used it to, so you said not work related, but that's where I did all the weird stuff.
Well, then let's drop it. Let's go for it. Remove that.
Like there's so much out in the world that and past me would be absolutely surprised at the number of unsupported scenarios that drive modern businesses. And now that I'm thinking of it, the one that I'm thinking of, it's not it wasn't technically unsupported, but like I know, like at a former job, there was so much stuff that it's like, we imaged is it first generation surfaces? I think we imaged first generation surfaces from SCCM over Wi-Fi. So Windows PE doesn't support Wi-Fi, but you can get it working, and that is an unsupported scenario. So there's a lot of things out there like that. But the one kind of, I used PowerShell to, and talking about it now, it sounds simple, and really it's like, that's not really pushing boundaries, but I used it to automate generating a report from one of the Cisco phone products. It was either Unity, which is the voicemail, or Unified Call Manager, which is the actual phone system itself. And for some reason, I'm thinking it was Unity. I used PowerShell to automate generating the report and downloading the report, which is a CSV file, and then going through that CSV file that is not actually a CSV file, and looking at each column to figure out which how I needed to interpret it, because the CSV file what, as I said, it wasn't a CSV file. It was basically an Excel file that each page of 20 or 30 results was in a different location, like column wise. So like if the seventh column contained a value, then this is what the columns look like. If it didn't contain a value, then you needed to look at column 5. But so the pushing the boundaries part wasn't so much the CSV handling. It was actually the getting and downloading the CSV, because you couldn't just invoke web request. And like, that's why I started out saying that it doesn't sound like it's pushing any boundaries, because you just invoke web request to download a file. But you couldn't with Unity. I want to say I was using COM interfaces to start up Internet Explorer, tell Internet Explorer to go to the site, tell it to log into the site, and navigate around the site using COM. And then once you told it to download the file, I had to step out of the COM and directly control keyboard and mouse input. And to tell it to, okay, so I've told you to download the file. Now I need you to actually save the file. So I need to hit the enter key, and then hope that it's saved to the right place, because
So this one sounds like there's no consistent, like every variable is constantly shifting, which makes automating it very difficult. You need something static.
Yeah, and then it wasn't until years later that I found there was technically an API that you could use to get out the same information, but it also, the Cisco APIs don't work with PowerShell very well. I did end up doing some stuff with the API. I never did the Unity side of it, which is the unfortunate thing. I started down the Unity side and then realized what a pain it was, that it was just easier to ask it for a CSV and then do stuff on the CSV. Because
Nice.
yeah.
Now I'm curious, is that something Import Excel could help with now, if like as far as cleaning it up? Because
it's entirely possible, and to be fair, probably likely that it could, because the biggest thing wasn't, I think I did use import it, or I did use import CSV, but I had to give it just headers that were like H1 through H30. And then because I couldn't just say, oh, this is the username, because the username could be in one of 3 different columns. Like,
I gotta be honest, this is giving me anxiety. Like, it feels like there's a lot of shifting things that are out of your control.
Yeah. And I feel like this was like PowerShell 3 or 4 days. Which also complicated things, because we didn't have, well, I guess in 3 and 4 we kind of had a lot of what we have today. PowerShell 2 was a giant leap, and then PowerShell 3 was the next big one. And then honestly, it's been performance improvements mostly since then, I think.
Well, I think moving to .core, .NET Core is
that was a huge we'll call it a sideways step, because there was big leaps forward, some leaps back, and it was more side. But then once we got to 7, where we're close, where I believe we're as close to feature parity as we're gonna get. The stuff that still requires Windows PowerShell is never coming to core, I think, like the WMI commandlets. And
the one that surprised me was Azure AD. Using the .NET Core, there was a authentication issue, like it couldn't. And that shocked me, because Azure feels like if anyone's going to work with the latest version, it's going to be anything in Azure. But so that one caught me off guard.
But let's move to the graph now, hasn't it? That was one of the ones that they moved.
Yeah. Oh man, Graph is amazing.
and frustrating.
Yeah.
So earlier you mentioned BridgeConf. What would it take for you to do BridgeConf 2?
What would it take to do BridgeConf 2? BridgeConf feels like a lightning in a bottle scenario. It feels like we caught on to something right at the beginning of the world just utterly collapsing. and there was a lot of people wanted a in particular, because that's when we were, I say we like I was actually going to be there, but that's when a lot of people were going to be at Summit. And so there was a lot of people that wanted the content, had presentations that they wanted to present as well. And there wasn't really anyone, to my knowledge, like people hadn't really done the live streamed event. Certainly not in the PowerShell community. And so we kind of captured that at that moment. We have talked a few times about the potential to take it and do a second one, but it's never really, I don't know that we could do it like as well as we did. Is that a picture? not to derail things, but
So for those that aren't watching on YouTube, Andrew has a comically large drinking vessel.
Comically large. Before this whole podcast started, you were telling me, oh, it was cool. Comically large, or maybe I'm comically small.
That looks like the picture that we use when I go to my aunt's house for dinner. That's what they have the juice in.
Everyone at the table can get their cup of juice from that one container.
It's glass too, so it's heavy.
It's important to hydrate.
I've got
I have bottles of water, but I'm just weird. Whole thing.
But, so to do a BridgeConf 2, Thomas Rayner and Attila and myself have, like, we've discussed it. We've tossed around the idea a few times. I'm not sure. I certainly don't think we would get the same turnout that we did. And I mean, like, really, it was a month between when we said, hey, we should do this, and when we did it. I don't know that we could one get that many speakers within a month, and two, as I said, the turnout. But as for what would it take for me to do it again? Stickers.
Okay, because the other issues you listed, I mean, we have some solutions for those. Not enough people attending, we can get you some. Not enough speakers, we talk to people every week.
It feels like one of the things is there's always people looking for more PowerShell content. I think the interest would be there. I think you're right. The big hurdle is getting enough speakers within a short turnaround. I guess we're only assuming it has to be a short turnaround again.
Well, and I guess there's the there's so many questions around how you, like, if you're going to do it, are you going to pre-record sessions? Are they going to be live streamed? If they're going to be live streamed, are you doing, like, we only did one track. I've seen a few other ones that tried to do like 2 or 3 tracks, and do it live streamed, which I'm not sure how well they turned out. But because, like, yeah, as for us, we did one track, which made it super easy. It's here, you go to Twitch, and this is what it is. And there's definitely, I feel like I feel like I typed up a blog post on it and then didn't actually finish up the blog post, which is about half of what my blog is not unfinished blog posts. But I had kind of covered stuff we had done and stuff that I would have liked to do better, and then partly with the idea that we'll do this again in 6 months, and then 2.5 years later.
Yeah. Well, I don't mean to put you all under the pressure here, but it would be interesting to see one day. And even on the smaller end, I think there might be space for more of a community lunchtime casual type engagement where it doesn't have to be super structured or organized, but maybe like a space for that, for more voice and sharing screen and that type of thing.
Yeah. One thing that I enjoyed when they were doing it was the PowerShell. Is it Power Hour? Did they call it?
Mm-hmm. Oh, that was awesome.
With Mikey Lombardi and Warren Frame, I believe we're doing it. I feel like there was a third person involved, and I'm forgetting their name. And if there was, I deeply apologize. And if there wasn't, well, good. I remembered 2 names, but like because they were basically lightning talks. They did and 1 hour, and they did like 6 talks in it. And I don't know that, but like something like a lunchtime, even if you only have like 2 or 3 people that each have like a 10-minute segment, and then 10 minutes to just chat in a Zoom style meeting, because I think that was one of the things for me that would have made that Power Hour better, is that like, so you have a demo, and then you have like a voice chat conversation, like where the audience can ask questions as opposed to just asking them in chat, where they have to like
read it.
You have to read it, and yeah.
I always like the Lightning Demo Summit just because it's less structured, but it's just people, instead of having a specific theme, they just go up there, hey, here's something cool I worked on. So I think having that just semi-regular would be actually pretty neat to see. But once again, it's easy to throw it out there, but the logistics of putting it all together and hosting place, there's a lot that goes into it that's not seen for the result.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's the...
Just trying to light some fires, throw some ideas out there. Maybe someone listening sparks on with them. Also, selfishly, I would love to chat with more people in the PowerShell community and just see what's up in a casual conversation. Like, I know that the Microsoft team does the monthly community call, which is cool, but it's less of a chill atmosphere. It's more like a presentation. Yeah, you're allowed to talk, and there is feedback encouraged, but I think they've actually talked about maybe doing lightning demos again. But anyways, it's a bit more structured than just a casual, like, hey, people in the community talking, hanging out.
Yeah.
But listen, sidebar. Yeah, it's always fun to see more and more people get engaged in the community. And we're definitely trying to do what we can to encourage that and participate in that when we can.
The community is always hungry for more content. It's just, I don't know. I was now that I'm more on the producing it side, knowing what goes into it to see the end result that's not always. There's so much, and I put it all on Andrew. I don't even do anything. And it's still exhausting.
But you see Andrew do the work, and
yeah, I watch what he does, and I'm exhausted just watching him.
It is surprising how much goes into just doing a weekly podcast. Like, it is surprising to me every week. I'm notoriously bad at estimating how much work something will take. Like, in my mind, everything's kind of sort of easier than it really is in reality. I'm aware of it, but yeah, like with this podcast, and
we're not even doing the editing. Like, we have a third guy for that, and that's a whole other undertaking.
Yeah. If we were to do the editing ourselves, I don't think we could. 1, maintain the quality, or 2, maintain it. Just how many hours can you put into one thing kind of a week? It can be challenging.
Yeah.
Gotta tell you what, this past week's been, wouldn't say a bad week, but just like a bit of an off week. And having this podcast to look forward to and having the one we recorded last week go out is just such a positive part of my life. And I'm very thankful to our audience for listening and kind of creating this awesome thing that we have going on here, and to the community at large for being so awesome and giving us so much stuff to talk about, and to Cory for joining us and sharing so much and for being so active for so many years in the community. And it's just, it's very cool to see. This is more than just like a service level PowerShell language kind of thing. You know, when you have relationships that you've built with people for that long, and where you've worked on projects together and you've solved issues together, it really is something special, in my opinion. And it adds kind of like an enrichment to this thing that we do for work. And yeah, it kind of is related to how we get paid, but it also can be like a really cool source of more than just that, whether that be relationships, projects, learning, good times, whatever it is. It's cool, this whole PowerShell thing.
So I think we had a user recommend a new segment that we're gonna try out. We're gonna use Cory as the test case. So if this doesn't go well, Cory, no pressure, but
No pressure. Okay.
going forward depends on how you handle this.
Yeah. Shout out to Drew McClellan for the suggestion. He suggests we have a couple of kind of consistent questions we ask each person, just so we can have something to kind of talk about, have a gauge on, and get a little bit of a better understanding of our beloved guests, like you, Cory. So, for the first question, Cory Knox, what is one time something went wrong while on the job, and how did you handle it? The more catastrophic, the better.
I'm trying to think of the catastrophic things that I've done.
I was going to say, this assumes Cory has made a mistake, and after talking to him, I'm not convinced that happens.
How does he know so much about all these Git commands?
Well, so we're definitely talking about stuff I've done, not stuff that has happened while I'm at work. Because like, I haven't crippled an entire network, but I've been there when someone did. We were using in one instance, and after the fact, it doesn't seem as catastrophic. We were using SCCM, or I think it was called SCCM at the time. It was SCCM 2007 we were using. This was in probably late 2012, early 2013, because of who was there. So it was sometime in 2013, and I was trying to deploy a computer, and in our environment, in order to do the deployment, you had to, like, we didn't have the ability to deploy operating systems to computers that already existed. So you had to delete the computer, and then you had to PXE boot it. Or I think we might have even still been on USB boot media at the time. And I had minimized, like, shrunk the sidebar on the in the SCCM console. And so to delete a system, you have to click on it and then click delete, or you can write. I can't remember if you were able to right click, but I certainly didn't right click. I went and I clicked delete. Now, I had minimized the sidebar to the point that I only had icons. In SCCM 2007, and I believe it went away in 2012, there were 2 delete options. And coincidentally, their icons were very similar, and they were right beside each other. And I click, I'm pretty sure it was called delete special. And then it prompts you and says, you've said to delete special. And what this is going to do is delete everything that's in this collection that you have open. And I had all systems collection open. Now, I assumed it was the normal prompt that said, hey, you're going to delete this object. Do you want to delete it? And I said, yes. And then 5 minutes later, my coworker sitting beside me says, why are there a lot less computers in SCCM? And we look, and sure enough, there was less. And we refresh, and there's less. And then I'll look again, and I'm like, oh, you know that delete special that you always said don't click? I clicked it. So then it's like, okay, so how do we get them all back in? And there's a couple ways we could have done it. We could have just let them all come back in on their own, because they'd all report back into SCCM, and SCCM would populate them. But then we'd have to put them all back into manual groups and stuff that we had. And then we said, well, do we have backups? So we had to call up the server team and say, hey, what backups do we have for the SCCM server? Now, the SCCM server was not deemed a production critical server. Like, it was, our team used it, and that was about it. So its backups were not as regular as the, like, say, the sales database and that sort of thing. But we had a backup that was, I think, 2 or 3 hours earlier. We're like, okay, can we restore to that, please? And so that's when we learned how to restore, and that the restore would actually work. And I mean, it's catastrophic in the sense that we almost, like, I deleted all of the computers in the SCCM, but also SCCM wasn't a production critical for us, so it wasn't. But for our team, it would have been at least a couple of days if the restore wasn't an option before we could get back to it. So
that's one of those. I think that's absolutely catastrophic. It's just you were fortunate to have just the backup at just the right time. So that's fantastic news, because I don't know. That sounds like it could be a rough one. You need your SCCM running.
Yeah. Well, and it wasn't like, and at the same place, one of the senior server admins deleted the entire DNS forest accidentally one day, which was that's more catastrophic. But that again showed us that not only are backups important, but ours were working. So
it wasn't a mistake. You were testing your backup solution.
Well, of course.
I like it.
Hopefully you documented it as well, I'm sure.
Well, and like, really the important, I think the important thing that I've learned from when I've had these issues and when others have had the issues is just own up to it immediately, because you're human, you made a mistake, and then everyone can work on fixing what the issue is, as opposed to everyone spending the time to try and figure out what happened. Because you're going to figure out what happened either way. It's just, if you come clean, you figure it out faster.
Oh, definitely. Honesty is very important in pretty much every facet, but yeah. In a work context, when mistakes are involved, definitely going to want to own up to that sooner than later. And hopefully you work at a place where owning up to things doesn't feel like the end of the world, and you've seen other people do it before, and it's kind of like a safe culture to do that. Otherwise, it's a painful pill to swallow.
Yeah. Well, in the one of the scenario I wasn't involved in, but I saw my friend crippled the network, and he totally thought he was being fired. We're several hundred locations across Canada, and none of them could talk to anyone because our data center just went completely offline. Coincidentally, we had people in the building in the data center at the time doing other work, but he was dead set that he was going to be fired because of it. And I pointed out to him after the fact that not only did he own up to it immediately, but he was literally following the change, like line by line, the change, the approved change request. And it's just, no one thought that that we would not have. In this case, he turned on bridging between two network interfaces that were connected to two different switches, but we're still, and they didn't have spanning tree protocol turned on in the data center, because why would you turn on spanning tree protocol on $10,000 routers. And
So that's with the honesty how important it is. If you're upfront and take ownership of your mistake,
Yeah.
there's a chance you'll get fired. If you try to hide from it, it's guaranteed you'll be fired.
yeah, and in the case I mentioned of where he took down the network one, like if he hadn't said, "Oh, hey, I just did this," instead of it being a 15-minute outage, it would have been hours of them trying to figure out why it suddenly went off. When you can say, "Hey, I just did this," and then, oh yeah, so one of the guys that happened to be in the data center went over, unplugged the cable, and everything just kind of came back up. Because
Well, one question, and I can say you're killing it, Cory. You're crushing it. But are you ready for question 2?
I guess.
All right. So with what you know now, what is one tip you would give your younger self when you're just starting in IT?
Okay. What? So I did not prepare for this, but I want to see if my daughter asked me a series of 16 questions in January for school, and I want to see if I actually answered that.
Look at that. He's the first ever test case for it, and he's already got pre-written answers. That is
DRY, don't repeat yourself. He's too efficient for us.
Describe some personal attribute.
Mine's easy. Don't waste a decade doing nothing, you idiot. And that's what I tell myself.
Actually, I don't have it here, but it's the advice that I would give to someone recently in one of the discords I'm in. Lamented that they were 21 and they felt like they'd spent 3 years doing nothing but playing games. And the advice I had for them is the advice that I would have given my younger self as well, is that and the most important advice I think is you should never compare yourself to anyone else. There's only one person in the entire world that you should compare yourself to, and that is your past self. Everyone has their own journey that they've been on, and for you to compare yourself to that other person is unfair to both you and to them, because you may think that they're doing great and wow, I wish I could do that, but also you have no idea what it may have taken for them to get there, and or what luck or an opportunity has come along the way for them. The only person you know is your past self, and even then, be gentle, because our past selves are, to put it bluntly, often idiots, and at least to present self's opinion, because
Past me was a lot cooler than current me, but he was a lot dumber too.
exactly.
Awesome. That's some good advice. It's definitely useful to not compare yourself to others. Such an inefficient use of time, because it just leads to so many not productive things, and you don't have the evidence to come to those conclusions about people. Yeah, I wish that's one lesson I wish I would have known back in the day too. I did eventually learn it, but a little bit more pain than was needed if I would have learned it sooner. But we have one final question here. Are you ready, Cory Knox? And this question is really up for debate. If you have suggestions on like a different question,
we don't love this question. If you have a better question, tweet it at us, and we'll replace it. We don't. This one, I apologize for the question before he even asks it.
Well, it came from my mind, and I thought it was okay. But here we go. This is the one that the other were Drew's. This one's all me. So
brought shame upon our house.
So this is a two-parter, Cory. I guess maybe a one-parter split two ways. But what is your favorite module right now? And then also, what was your favorite module 2 to 3 years ago? We should send these to people beforehand.
No.
That would
They're kind of tough.
that would be handy. Let me just let me see what. Oh, I just did get module list available, which might have been a bad idea or a good idea to see that I have like 7 of one module, because why not? So I don't have. Well, okay, PoshGit would be my favorite right now, I think. And it's not even that it is super complex or anything. It's just the information that it gives me at my fingertips. As far as 2 to 3 years ago, I don't know that I can. Well, maybe let me flip that around. Say 2 to 3 years ago was PoshGit, because maybe it was, and PS Readline would be the, in particular, as someone has mentioned at some point in the past, the new prediction sources stuff. I have no idea where it came from, but if you find out who's been saying that you should be using PS Readline with the predictions, you should really have them on the show.
I know 2 fun young lads who have healthily shilled for PS Readline for a while now.
I'm a big fan. I'm gonna do some research and see if we can find out who that may have been.
Yeah.
And when we're done here, I'm gonna go figure out what this string module that I have is called, or is, because it's just called string, and it has add string and get substring, and I don't know where I got it from, but it looks interesting. So
look at that. We're helping with self-improvement. Maybe the question is the right question, but we'll find out via Twitter. All right. Well, thank you for letting us spring those questions on you.
Thank you.
I think Andrew's right that maybe in the future we'll send the 3 questions beforehand, just because a lot of those require a lot of digging into the past.
Let's just say I'm glad you didn't ask me those same questions. Okay.
I'm glad we credited Drew. So if it's really hated, we all know where to point the finger.
Except the last one, because
that's all me.
But I mean, like, because the last time, or I can hardly remember 2 hours ago, let alone 2 to 3 years ago. Like,
I'm with you there. I need to write down my good stories so that I like have them accessible, because a lot of times I'll have to be like talking about an old job, and then I'll be like, oh my gosh, that's right. There were so many wild things that happened there.
I need to live my life in such a way that I can get some good stories.
Oh, we have a few. I won't share them here.
But now it's time for the absolute. This is Andrew's time to shine. He's going to bring his professionalism, his expertise, his years of knowledge and practice, and he's going to bring the shill that everyone that loves shills has been waiting for.
The thrill of the shill is here, friends. Thank you so much for listening and being part of this awesome community, and checking out our podcast and giving us good feedback on it. Really appreciate that. If you could, leave us a like on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button if you'd like. Leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast platform of choice. You can hit us up on Twitter at PowerShellPod or email us at PowerShell@pdq.com. Is there something that you are struggling with or would like covered on the podcast? Feel free to let us know. And again, thanks so much for listening. Really appreciate it. I think we're on like, I don't know how many podcasts, 20 something. So
it's 27.
It says 27
it's been,
at the top.
Oh, it's fun. Oh yeah, it does. So yeah, 27. Wow. Happy Monday if you're listening on Monday.
Thanks for listening to the PowerShell Podcast with your hosts, Jordan Hammond and Andrew Plough.
They are cunning, capable, agile, flexible.
The PowerShell Podcast is a production of PDQ.com.